In 2015, in a rock shelter in southern France, archaeologists found a single tooth, a small, worn deciduous molar from a child maybe 6 years old. It was 54,000 years old, and it did not belong to the people who made that layer of the cave. The layers around it were Neanderthal tools below, Neanderthal tools above, and in between, one modern human tooth. As if two different species had taken turns living in the same shelter, generations apart. The tooth raised a question no one wanted to answer directly. If modern humans were there 54,000 years ago, and Neanderthals were still there afterward, then the old story, the clean story, was wrong. For most of the 20th century, the story went like this. Modern humans emerged from Africa, spread into Europe, and simply overwhelmed the Neanderthals. Better brains, better tools, eventually a better army. The Neanderthals lost, and lost completely, pushed to the fringes of the continent until they flickered out sometime around 28,000 years ago.
Survivors lingering in Refugia in southern Spain and the Caucasus. That version of events was comfortable. It was a victory story to hold by the winners. Then the dates started to fall apart. Radiocarbon dating has a weakness. Near its limit of about 50,000 years, contamination, modern carbon seeping into old bone, makes a fossil look thousands of years younger than it really is. For decades, scientists knew this was a problem. They just didn't know how bad. A new technique, ultrafiltration, was designed to strip every trace of contamination from collagen before dating. When it was applied to the famous Neanderthal remains, the results were devastating. Bones from Vindia Cave in Croatia, long presented as proof that Neanderthals survived until 28,000 years ago, were redated. They were 40,000 years old. The infant from Mezmyskia Cave, once dated to 30,000, was pushed back past 39,000. One by one, the late surviving Neanderthals turned out to be ordinary Neanderthals. And the Refugia? The Refugia never existed. When the corrected dates were compiled across 40 key sites in Europe, the picture snapped into focus. The stone tool industry associated with the Neanderthals, the Mousterian, ends everywhere at the same time, between roughly 41,000 and 39,000 years ago. Not a slow regional fate, a single, simultaneous disappearance across an entire continent. Which brings us back to the tooth.
If modern humans had reached southern France by 54,000 years ago and Neanderthals were still there thousands of years later, then the two species shared Europe for a very long time. Estimates now put that overlap at anywhere from 2,600 to 5,400 years, side by side. Not conquest, not war, neighbors. So if the Neanderthals weren't wiped out, why did they vanish? The answer came not from bones, but from the other kind of evidence, DNA. And it pointed somewhere unexpected, inward. In the Altai Mountains of Siberia, caves in the Chagorskaya and Okladnikov river valleys have yielded high-coverage Neanderthal genomes. They tell a startling story about a species that stretched from the Atlantic to the Pacific. There were never many of them. Computer models based on their DNA estimate that the total breeding population of all Neanderthals across all of Eurasia was somewhere between 2,400 and 3,400 individuals. Not millions, not hundreds of thousands. A few thousand people, scattered in bands of 10 to 30 adults, spread across half the planet. These bands were small, isolated, and chronically inbred. Genetic analysis of the Siberian group reveals a patrilocal society. Females moved between bands, males stayed. And with such tiny pools of mates, harmful mutations accumulated across generations, unchecked. The Neanderthals were not a thriving species. They were a species living on the edge of demographic collapse, hundreds of thousands of years before modern humans ever set foot in Europe. Then the climate turned against them. Marine isotope stage 3, the period between 60,000 and 27,000 years ago, was a time of violent climate whiplash. Rapid warming events followed by abrupt plunges into cold known as Heinrich events. In Europe, the forest shrank. Mosaic woodland, broken by trees and cover, became open, frigid steppe.
The Neanderthal body was built for exactly the wrong world. Heavy, stocky, designed to retain heat and deliver short-range ambush strikes in wooded terrain. And that powerful frame required a massive amount of food, a lot of calories, every single day. In the open steppe, there was nothing to ambush from. Their thrusting spears were useless in a landscape with no cover. Hunting success collapsed, and with it, nutrition. Teeth from El Cedron Cave in Spain, 43,000 years old, carry bands of enamel hypoplasia, literal growth lines from chronic starvation, etched into the enamel of Neanderthals in their final generations. The incoming humans were built for the new world, lighter bodies, lower metabolic needs, and spear throwers, weapons that let a hunter kill a horse or a bison from a distance without ever closing in for the violent, risky part. Modern humans could feed themselves on the open steppe. The Neanderthals, increasingly, could not. But even starvation and a changing climate are not the whole answer, because the DNA shows something that none of the old models predicted. The interbreeding was not a single event. It was a continuous process, spanning more than 200,000 years. The first contact came as early as 250,000 years ago, when the first modern humans moved out of Africa and left traces of their genes in Neanderthals. A second wave of exchange happened in the Levant, around 120,000 to 100,000 years ago. And then the main event, the Great Out-of-Africa expansion, 60,000 to 47,000 years ago, when a flood of modern humans, enormous in number compared to the scattered Neanderthal bands, poured into the Near East. Here is where the mathematics takes over.
Genetic modeling shows that when a large, demographically dominant population repeatedly absorbs small numbers of newcomers over and over for thousands of years, the smaller genome does not survive as a distinct entity. It gets diluted, saturated, swallowed. No genocide is required, no climate catastrophe, no war. Just the slow, relentless arithmetic of a few thousand inbred people meeting a population many times their size. Generation after generation, Neanderthal genes flowed into the modern human pool, and generation after generation, fewer Neanderthals remain Neanderthal. By around 40,000 years ago, the distinct phenotype was gone, not killed, assimilated. But here's the part that still unsettles scientists. The Neanderthals did not entirely disappear, because their genes are still here. Every non-African person alive today carries between 1.5 and 2.1% Neanderthal DNA. Different populations inherited different fragments, so scattered across all of humanity, roughly 20 to 30% of the entire Neanderthal genome survives, preserved in fragments inside us. And those fragments were not neutral. They were useful. When modern humans left the tropics for cold, pathogen-rich Eurasia, they were newcomers to an environment the Neanderthals had endured for 300,000 years. Interbreeding handed them the immune system upgrades they needed. The OAS1 gene cluster, which defends against RNA viruses, toll-like receptors, the first line of defense against infection, keratin genes for thicker skin, tougher hair, better insulation against low sunlight and freezing winters, even metabolic adaptations, gene clusters involved in fat processing in European populations, immune pathways in East Asian ones. Modern humans didn't just inherit Neanderthal geography, they inherited Neanderthal survival.
But the inheritance came with a bill. Because the Neanderthal genome was small and inbred for so long, it accumulated slightly harmful mutations that natural selection never had the numbers to purge. Their average biological fitness has been calculated at least 40% lower than that of modern humans of their time. And when those genes entered the modern human pool, they brought the cost with them. The evidence is written in our DNA. Large stretches of the X chromosome, the deserts, are almost completely empty of Neanderthal ancestry, and genes active in the male testes show the same pattern. This is Haldane's rule in action. When a modern human mother carried a Neanderthal father's child, the male offspring were often sterile. That's why no Neanderthal mitochondrial DNA survives in anyone alive today. Mitochondria pass through the maternal line, and the mother always carried the modern human genome. So the gene flow ran mostly one way, and it still shapes your body right now. One of the most dangerous pieces of the Neanderthal inheritance is a haplotype on chromosome 3. In 2020, it was found to increase the risk of severe respiratory failure from COVID-19 by up to 60%. A stretch of DNA assembled in the cells of Neanderthals tens of thousands of years ago, deciding today which patients fill the ventilators. The Neanderthals did not go extinct in the way we mean extinction. Their bones stopped appearing, their tools stopped being made. Their physical form faded from the landscape around 40,000 years ago. But the species itself was never eliminated. It was folded into something larger. Think about the scale of what happened. A few thousand people, scattered and fragile, met a tide they could not stop. And rather than being annihilated, they were absorbed. Their faces, their biology, their immune history, all of it poured into the modern human lineage and kept flowing. That is the true answer to the question. The Neanderthals didn't vanish. They were absorbed into the flood. You don't have to look at a museum to find a Neanderthal. They are the reason your skin is thicker, the reason your immune system fights off certain viruses a little faster. 40,000 years after the last Neanderthal died, one of their genes is still deciding how your body responds to a virus it never knew. The Neanderthals did not die out. They got smaller and smaller, until all that was left of them was you.